Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and today is the 28th of March, 2025. And, another nice day. I'm extremely tired today because I've been teaching this new class this week. And I'm realizing I think I have to get a podcast out on Monday. And I'm like, I don't think I've even started the research for it because, yes, it's just been taken up with that. And I'm going to have back-to-back teaching Saturday, Sunday, and then today I've actually got appointments and things all day. I'm going to have some time in between to do stuff, but I imagine Katonia live stream is going to be late next week, so trying to keep up. And good morning, Suda. Good to see you. And we'll see who drops on this morning. I have, I guess the upshot is I've been sleeping very much better. My sleep is very good. And I've been doing something of a cortisol detox, which I think has actually been helping. But right now, I'm just I'm just so tired. I mean, I taught class yesterday, and it was fine. Everything went well. But we ended a little bit early, which I was glad of because I was like, good, then I can get home before it gets dark. I don't know. I just was very. I'm just realizing, I guess I'm realizing how tired I am. One of my students said to me on the way out, she's like, girl, you better go get some rest. Because, I mean, the class was fine. It wasn't like I was tired during the class. But as she was leaving, we were talking about this weekend. And actually, it's going to be quite warm here. They're saying it's going to be almost 80 degrees tomorrow. So that's interesting. And good morning, Kathleen. Good to see you. And so that's kind of where we've been over the last couple of days. And I'm thinking like, crap, I've got to fit a podcast in. I've got Reiki Master class for 4 hours on Saturday. And I've got Reiki 2 that I'm doing on Sunday. And on all those days, I'm also meeting up with different people because I'm getting into what I call birthday month. My birthday is in April. It's not till late April. So it's not, not imminently, but people start early. They're like, hey, let's get together. So, So anyway, that's just kind of a little mini update on me. And like I said, I am going to live stream tomorrow and probably not Sunday. I'm probably going to give myself Sundays off, actually. And a lot of people don't necessarily want to get up early on Sunday. Saturday, people are doing stuff. You've got to go out and you're, doing the shopping, doing whatever, errands, whatever you're not doing during the week. So people sometimes are up on Saturday. But Sunday, I was like, I'll give myself Sunday off, and I'm going to try to find some time somewhere in between. And Alistair, good morning. Good to see you. And actually, I think this should be tomorrow should be the last podcast, last live stream day where we have the 4-hour time difference. And then we're going to flip back to 5 again as of next Monday, which will be it won't be April the 1st. It'll be March 31st, and then it'll be April the 1st. So we're trucking along here. We do have that solar eclipse coming up on. Somebody asked me about the new moon that's coming up, the new moon in Aries, and then we're going to have a solar eclipse as well. The energy. I think I'm actually going to talk about the energy of that tomorrow on the eclipse day. We'll probably do a reading to kind of see what that energy is going to mean for a lot of us who are on here. But so. The thing I was going to talk about today, for some reason that was on my mind when I woke up this morning, has to do with the 6 of Cups. It's a card we get kind of frequently. And as we mentioned, anybody who's done tarot classes or whatever with me knows that when we talk about 6s, the 5s are kind of a level of struggle. I mean, they're mental struggle, trying to overcome mental limitations. And Alistair says March has flown by. Yeah, and you think about it, March, usually we're all talking about how March is such a long ass month. It's like it's like, when is it going to end? But this year, it does seem like it's gone by very, very fast. Time itself lately feels like it's going very, very fast. But in any case, we move from the 5s to the 6s. And so 6s are something of a respite from the 5. Now, when we think of 5 and 7, it's, you're kind of in between these two stages of struggle, engagement, and then reevaluation. And good morning, Alex. Good to see you. You've got this kind of reevaluation that's going on. And when you're in the 6s, the 6s are they're kind of either a moment to pause a moment of victory, a moment perhaps to move away. Like if we think of the Six of Swords is energy of kind of moving away from the anxieties of the fives. And one second here. Okay. We got we've got some assholes who were starting early today. Anyway, Six of Cups. So we're at this moment that's this kind of pause, and it's so we've got this. So when we look at the Six of Cups in particular, I mentioned this one, I think, because it's been coming up quite frequently in our readings. We've been seeing it in the Osho Zen deck as the dream card. Right? We have that. We got this yesterday. I think we've kind of gotten it all week. This idea of the dream, and the way this portrays it is as the girl who is, wistfully kind of looking at this. Now, you would think for a girl her age and the people here, this is not a memory of the past, right? This is more. It's more like the kind of daydreaming that someone does about, the perfect romance or the perfect person or situation that's going to take us away. And I think that's kind of more the energy that's being conveyed there. But it's a pretty complicated card when you want to look at it in kind of all of its correspondences. Now, first of all, one of the things about it, which some people find a little surprising, is that Six of Cups has to do with Sun in Scorpio. Okay, Scorpio, when we think of the energy of the Six of Cups, it may feel a little more Piscean, right? Like more about that kind of like, that dreamy, that 12th house kind of energy where we're kind of floating and imaginative and maybe not grounded in the present and things like that. But it is Scorpio. And that's kind of interesting if we think about it. Because Scorpio and Scorpionic energy is generally whatever else. I mean, obviously, as I said, all signs have a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum of the way that you view it. I mean, there's what you'll if you look in any book that describes the aspects of a sign, there's going to be positive attributes and negative attributes. And with Scorpio, they actually tend to be couched in two different terms. There's like the eagle and the snake. And so Scorpionic energy is deep, it's intense. It's connected with the 8th house, which is the house of death and rebirth. Okay. So it has a lot to do with this idea of, what's really down in the depths, what's really, under the surface. That is something that, and again, these things that tend to be deep and hidden under the surface, I mean, that can be buried treasure, and it can also be kind of the rotten decay of something too. Like you have the element of both in the 8th house. And in modern astrology, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. In more traditional, or in either in Vedic astrology or astrology pre-outer planets, it was ruled by Mars. And we can kind of see that actually Antares, which is a kind of called the second Mars or the second Aries, which is a red giant star, is in the constellation of Scorpio. Okay, so that kind of might be at least part of why the Scorpionic energy tends to be associated with Mars. But the Six of Cups. Okay, so knowing that Scorpionic energy is very deep and intense, and my experience of Scorpio people, and I know we have Scorpios on here today, is that why I'm always taking Suda? Quite possibly, yeah, because you are Scorpio, okay? You're a very deep and intense person. Like it's when you have that strong Scorpio in your chart, whether it's your sun sign or whether you just have the strong energy anyway, you tend to be somebody who's just not satisfied with the surface interpretation of things. You want to, that's why I'm always digging. Yeah, kind of trying to go through and say like, yeah, well, what's behind this? What's behind this? What's behind this? And like I said, my experience, I've experienced Scorpios on both sides of the spectrum. I know Scorpios in my family who are like the most vile, conniving, secretive in a negative way. Like, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to lie to you and not tell you what you need to know type of energy, which is a very, very negative snake, more what they call the snake Scorpio. The more evil Scorpios too, That's the majority of people that I've known. And it tends to be people, yeah, who are just very strong. They're leaders. They're well-spoken. They're very, very kind people. They're very empathetic people, but you also sense an intensity about them. And sometimes they're people I've known who are very, very outgoing and talking about you. Maybe they don't talk as much about themselves sometimes to people because Scorpio, because there's kind of the 8th house has a secretive nature to it. And again, it's not that there's anything nefarious about it, or it's like, oh, I'm going to try to get information about you and not tell you about me. But I don't know. It's almost the way in which an introvert behaves. And I'm saying Scorpios are not necessarily introverts. In fact, frequently they're not. But there's this energy of, there's always like this this vision of internal vision. There's this vision going on that is not, as much as it's expressed and is shared to other people, it's not something, sometimes it's something that's kind of kept inside here. So yeah, so we think about that. So whatever our impression of Scorpio, we definitely have this idea of intensity. People with first house, like Scorpio ascendant, sometimes tend to be people, like if you talk to someone who has a Scorpio ascendant, and there you go, Alex, rising, and I feel like a good word for Scorpio is conviction. Interesting. Okay, yeah. The idea that you have, right, that you kind of, it's almost like without having to express it so much. It's kind of more like what's felt or intuitive, or what seems to come out. It's things that come out of the depths in any case. It's in the sense that there's a depth to Scorpio that you pick up on right away. And sometimes, depending on Scorpio ascendant plus certain other sun signs and maybe other planets too. Like, for example, if someone had a Scorpio ascendant and maybe Pluto in the first house, that person might come across as somebody who could like look at you and kind of look through you. There's kind of that energy of Scorpio has, seems to have a very deep understanding of things. And yeah, when you're using the word conviction, Alex, it could be kind of like the sense that you kind of know without, without necessarily having to explain. Kind of when we talk about evaluating without having to understand, there's a conviction, there's a knowledge there that one has, because the one is sort of almost naturally has that depth to them. Now, of course, Scorpio's obviously in everybody's chart somewhere. And people who have Scorpio in the 8th house, of course, that's in dignity. And Alex says, exactly, that's me. Right, because, because you're, well, you have also a lot of Libra to you too. So you're, of course, a very, friendly and outgoing. Like, people wouldn't look at you, and I don't think people would look at you and be like, oh God, I'm super, scared by this person or intimidated. Not that has to be the case with Scorpio, but it's funny, but yeah, you have that combination of the Libra with the Scorpio. And of course, those two signs are right next to each other. So yeah, there is a very much an outgoing and friendly nature that you can have, and also one that's just, like you say, speaking with conviction. I know where I stand on this, and a lot of times that's coming from a very deep place. So it's interesting that this is connected to the 6 of Cups, because if we go back to the Rider-Waite version of this card. Okay, so what do we see on this card? You have the 6 cups actually have flowers growing out of them. Okay, there's like cups with little flowers, and you have now this is often interpreted as being 2 children, although we're never quite sure about. People are always questioning, like, who is this person here? It's kind of interesting because they both have their hair covered, so there's almost the implication that they are. I don't know, but I mean, you almost get the idea. Well, interestingly, the kind of hood that this child is wearing almost looks like something a jester would wear, which is what I think is interesting. So I don't know if this is meant to be a child or meant to be somebody who has that kind of energy, fool kind of energy, Aries, kind of fool energy, handing this flower to what looks like a much smaller person. Okay, it looks like a child. These are not being represented as grown people. These are looking a little bit more like children. And this card is indeed associated with children. It's kind of in this pastoral setting. We've talked about colors on the cards, and this kind of light blue is this kind of clarity seeking, calmness, that kind of a thing. There's something that's supposed to be very restful about this, and this is supposed to be a scene of giving one of these cups to this child, so to speak. And so this is the traditional 6 of Cups. Now I have a couple of other ones too. Now, of course, obviously I have the cat deck, and this one's cute because it's a bunch of cats like in a swimming pool, which is kind of interesting. that, which, you know, because I don't know, I think a lot of cats generally hate water, although there's some that do like it. I actually meant to pull the one from the Barbara Walker deck because that one was interesting. I didn't pull that one this morning, but that's okay. Yeah, so there's almost this idea of, you know, the cats just kind of getting together. You have the water element being represented by the pool, right? Because Scorpio is water element, and you know, it does represent swimming in the depths, so to speak. You know, you're swimming in the waters. And I did pull. It's my favorite in the deck. Yeah, it is. There's something kind of restful about it, right? There's something about it, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now I pulled something from the Mythic Tarot because I have this deck, but I don't often use it, maybe because the figures on it don't appeal to me that much, but it is interesting because it does pull a Greek mythological view of the deck. And this one shows, this is the Eros and Psyche myth. The suit of cups is represented by the mythology of Eros and Psyche. And this is after Eros has left Psyche, which is the Five of Cups. And here she is kind of sitting on a rock, kind of looking at this one cup. She's here, she's alone. Okay, she's had the loss of the Five of Cups, and now she's kind of sitting on this rock alone, contemplating what has just happened. I mean, that's kind of the theory of it. And then we have Crowley's Six of Cups, which is called in Crowley's deck and in the more esoteric decks, this is called the card of pleasure. So in the Thoth deck, you have the Six Cups, and you have all these kinds of flowers. Now, I grabbed my copy of the Book of Thoth, which is basically the explanation of this, and I'm going to tell you what Crowley has to say about the imagery on this card. He says, this card shows the influence of the number 6. Tiferet. Now, if you do Kabbalah, Tiferet, as I've mentioned, is that center point of the tree of life. It's above the kingdom. It's not up to Keter, which is the unmanifest. The manifest is Malkut, which is at the bottom. Tiferet is almost like the path you've climbed, and now it's like the mountaintop that you stand on. I think sometimes I've seen it compared to like Moses standing on Mount Sinai, right? You're able to look down and see the big picture. Okay, that's the energy of the 6. And it says it's fortified by that of the sun, who also represents 6. Okay, right, because it's sun in Scorpio specifically. And 6 is a solar number. The fierce but balanced power of the sun, it operates that type of putrefaction that's in the sign of Scorpio. Now, the reason he uses the word putrefaction is because, remember, Scorpio is also about death and decay. Okay, so he's saying that, which is the basis of all fertility and all life. The lotus stems are grouped in an elaborate dancing movement. From their blossoms, water gushes into the cups, but they are not yet full to overflowing as they are in the 9. Pleasure, the title of this card, must be understood in its highest sense. It implies well-being, harmony of natural forces, without effort or strain, ease and satisfaction. Foreign to the idea of the card is the gratification of natural or artificial desires. But he talks about it, and he talks about in the I Ching and so forth. Which he says that the hexagram is Quan, which is also big earth, being the earth trigram with double lines, Quan meaning manifesting, but also contemplating. And Thuan refers to a high priest ceremonially purified about to present his offerings. Okay, and it's interesting that you have somebody presenting something here, right? I mean, but it's presenting it to a child. So he talks about some other things in there that have to do with the 9th degree of the OTO, which we don't really need to get into here. But the 6 in this one is interesting too. This is the mythic one. The 6 of Cups is a card of nostalgia. Here we see Psyche abandoned, her mysterious husband flown away, beautiful palace in which they lived has vanished, and she has nothing left but her pleasant memories. However, despite this catastrophe, Psyche appears tranquil, for the 6 of Cups is not an unhappy card. Though through the past, Psyche has gained something very precious. She has truly seen Eros, and now knows she loves him for himself rather than for the comfort and the pleasure that he provides. Thus, despite her loss, she knows something about herself, and it is this truth which fosters the harmony we see in the card. The stillness and serenity which often occur after a crisis in our lives are related to this stage of the story. Here, the unreal dreams and expectations of the past, through testing and disappointment, 5 of Cups, somehow crystallize into something solid and real. Psyche has taken up the challenge of regaining her lost love after the regrets and remorse of the Five of Cups, and is therefore at peace with herself. Her love has become a reality, thus she has something to build upon. The nostalgia of the past always comes back to haunt us at such times, but there's a negative truth in it. It is not merely sentimental fantasy without foundation. After the self-recrimination of the Five, the Six of Cups remains a positive turn in Psyche's journey towards her goal. And don't forget, Psyche is also the word for soul, and that her marriage to Eros has something to do, somewhat metaphorically, maybe archetypally, with the way in which the soul connects to love. This is Juliet Sherman Burke, who is a Jungian therapist, actually, who is one of the creators of this deck. And so we have a lot to think about there in the tranquility of the six. Yeah, we talked about nostalgia. When you see this come up in a reading, we'll talk a lot about, we're looking back on the past, right? And it's interesting, right? Yeah, you're looking back on the past. And we sometimes see that as a bad thing. Don't look back, don't get stuck in the past, right? Because like anything, when you're doing a reading, if you have the six surrounded by, let's just say you have the Six of Cups followed by the Eight of Swords, there could be this worry that you are going to get stuck or looped into thinking about the past, okay? And in fact, this card seems to almost imply a need to move on from the past or from the dream, right? But we also have to remember that when we have dreams, and so forth, on the one hand, dreams can be our source of inspiration, right? We can, just because something may not have a practical grounding in reality at this point, doesn't mean sometimes that it's not something we can't strive for. But the other thing too, I'm reminded of when I was taking my psych of religion classes with a woman who was she was a Freudian psychotherapist, actually. And she was also a Episcopal priest. And she said, when you have people who come in for therapy who are desperately unhappy and their lives are miserable and their lives are traumatized, she said, the question becomes, as a child, did you ever know happiness? Was there ever a happy time as a child? So in other words, if we look back, if we say, oh, geez, I got too much going on in my life right now, whether we feel sad or traumatized by it or anxious about it, or whether it's just that we have like a wistful, gee, remember when I was a kid and didn't have any cares and didn't, but the fact that if you can look back on a past where you have had happy moments, she says, then you are capable of recapturing happiness again. If you've experienced that, if you've had a childhood where you've never experienced that, then that's a whole different problem, right? And all of us can probably look back on our past, and a lot of times we may look back with regret. Which is more the Five of Cups energy. We may look back and say, there's this thing or that thing that, or again, I feel like the Six of Cups sometimes can bring up an energy of missing the past, missing like when you could just be a kid and play and you didn't have to worry about, paying the bills and worrying about this one and that one, or worrying if you have kids, worrying about your own children, or worrying about where, you didn't have those same sense of responsibility that you feel you have, like the weight that life puts on you in society as you get older. So there may be a tendency to look back to the past. So the question is, when we look back to this pleasure, and again, Crowley points out in this one that it's not the pleasure of the Nine of Cups where the cups are filled. The cups aren't quite full in this one. So there's a kind of pleasure, and he calls it pleasure and putrefaction. Such an interesting paradigm shift when I feel like traditional therapy over indexes on trauma. Yeah, and it's just right, and it's just this. Yeah, so there's this kind of sense that. There tends to be this focus on the trauma or on the crisis, but the question does become, what's the broader context here? Like what can you pull from? And I think this even goes beyond gratitude practice. If we think about a lot of things that happen, especially in cognitive therapies or in emotional type therapies, if somebody has a particular anxiety, like just to give an example, people know, talk to death about my driving anxiety, right? But with the driving anxiety, one of the things that my friend Cynthia had said to me at one point was, she said, can you go back to a point where you felt exactly the same way you do when you have that anxiety? Because the idea is that there's something in our past experience. Now, of course, if you're a believer in past lives and things like that, and you accept that idea, you know, the question then also becomes that broadens the scope, right? If you can say, I can't point to anything in my life that would make me feel this way now. Now, one possibility is that you haven't uncovered it yet. Okay, there's this idea of uncovering, right? Which may be also the energy of the six. We're going back and we're uncovering the spaces that are comforting to us. Okay, but also, you know, so go back and find that feeling. Whether it doesn't have to be a repeat of the same exact situation, but there could be a feeling that is connected with it, right? And so, yeah, so we've got this. So our past can tell us something about where we are at the present. And I think the fact that this is Scorpio. Now, Scorpio to me is something, again, I think of Scorpio, the main word that comes to mind is depth. Okay. Scorpio is also connected with the death card. It's the depth of thing. It's that great, great mystery of life that says that life and death are intimately connected. They're not two separate things where one is to be strived for and the other is a bad thing or an evil or represents an evil. That the two are very deeply, inexorably linked. Now, Alex says, so interesting. That's like a moment of a seed being sown and then how it shows up unconsciously, whether pleasure or trauma. Well, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it too. Because when you're in childhood, there's a seed that's planted, but there may be a seed that's even planted in you. Because if you're talking about the depth, you're talking about, you know, we might be talking about ancestry. Eighth house also has to do with our ability to be intimate with others. Okay, what level of intimacy? People who have Chiron in Scorpio, maybe people who have trust issues. You know, there's this idea of how deeply do you trust in life? How deeply do you feel that? Kind of, you know, how deeply are things felt? How deep do these roots go? Right. So we may look back on something. We may look back at something that, with nostalgia, and the question then becomes in the present. You know, what do we do with that past moment? It's not a matter of, you know, reversing or regressing and going back to it necessarily. There's the question of where does it fit into the tapestry, so to speak? Where does it fit into the big picture? It kind of, I have a card in my own deck called the End Land, and the End Land is really about the ways in which we need to release the past, but that doesn't mean that we have to let go of everything. And sometimes things that have been were a part of our identity before or part of our formation are still part of our foundation. They're still part of who we are. They're still part of what's going on here. And yeah, so yeah, it's kind of interesting how the Six of Cups, which we tend to more superficially look at as, oh, like with Mercury being retrograde and Venus being retrograde, there's the idea of people from your past turning up. Okay, you know, returned, people who are returning. But the one thing about returns, it's like if you've ever seen like a TV show or a movie or something, like when you were a kid. And let's just say as a kid that whatever that was made a huge impact on you, you know, either way, either it scared you or you thought it was really cool, or I don't know, whatever it was, something that makes a huge impact on you. I'm gonna actually just go with things that kind of scare you. Okay, you go back and, like, I think about TV shows I saw like in 1979 as a kid. You know, I remember watching them in my best friend's basement next door. We would sit, they had this big rec room down in their basement. We would sit and watch these different TV shows. And seeing like these Vincent Price things and certain things and thinking like, oh wow, like they really grab your attention. And then as an adult, you find it somewhere. You find it on YouTube, you find it and you go, oh yeah, I remember watching that. I was really scared. You go and watch it again. Doesn't have the same impact. You watch it and kind of go, oh, this is actually kind of cheesy. You know, like you as an adult, you look at it from a very, very different perspective. And it's almost like, yeah, it's kind of like revisiting your hometown, actually, after years. You think like, oh, I know people like that, or like, oh, I want to go back to my childhood home. I want to go back here. I want to go back there. And when you go back, it's never quite the same. One of the things that what themes we had talked about, I took a class on the psychodynamics of myth in grad school, and one of the things we talked about was the Odyssey. And Odysseus goes away on this long journey. He's in the Trojan War. He stops in all these islands. He has all these experiences. All he's trying to do is go home, right? But when he gets home, home is not the same as when he left. And Ginny, who was our Dr. Phelan, who was she was our teacher for all of this, and she had said, yeah, she says, in a certain sense, you can never go home again. You can go back. You may revisit the same people, but you're not the same person you were as a child. There may be elements of your childlike nature that remain. Okay, maybe this is the thing we're trying to look at and recapture. There's really nothing wrong with going back to childhood to try to reclaim a sense of playfulness or a sense of imagination. I don't think that's regressive. I think that is integrative. I think that's about taking what we have that was in the past that was useful to us and trying to make it trying to see where this piece fits in. It's like, when you're cleaning your house out and you say, okay, what am I going to do with this now? What am I going to do with this piece that either I'd forgotten about, or in some way, is this informing my life in a way? Is it still relevant? There is kind of an examination with the Six of Cups. There's a tranquility to it because it has to do with happy memories. It's not like the Five where we're mourning unhappy things and things that we've lost. Kind of looking back, we're kind of going back to that peaceful setting, that pastoral place that the kind of Western mythology suggests that, like the hero mythology suggests that this is where we start from. And it's like a respite. It's a break before we turn, where we might actually start to be able to see the possibilities of the Seven of Cups. Because the Seven of Cups, as we know, there's a danger there that, it can be about looking at possibilities, but it can also be about, if we're in this kind of space that's not really rooted in the present, we might potentially fall into delusion, or we might fall into these other things when by the time you get to the Seven of Cups. But the Seven of Cups can also positively represent that possibility that we have. But I feel like the Six is almost a place of origin. It's the place you have to go back, where you go back, and you may be examining things in your ancestry and your tradition and your roots. And that to me is the scorpionic part of it. Even though we think of that kind of stuff as being fourth house, Cancerian type stuff, when we are talking about the depths of our intimate relationships, fourth house is probably more like the parental archetypes, how we deal with mom in particular. Fourth and 10th house are like the mom and dad houses. Eighth house is more about how we're intimate with other people. This is how we move into the soul connection, anima animus, right? They always say that when you fall in love or you have your projections, you are starting, initially they start with the parent image. That's your image of, and again, whatever genders people are attracted to, whether they're attracted to, obviously we talk about man-woman relationships. And I realize, again, there are other permutations, man-man, woman-woman. People who are gender fluid don't necessarily have certain identifications. But nonetheless, your first images about gender tend to come from your parental figures, whoever they are, and wherever that archetype is projected. And so in this kind of a paradigm, whatever, when you move to the point of adolescence and older, where you start to feel sexual love, or you start to feel more of a sense of wanting to be intimate with somebody, not just like, we're two friends in the garden here. When you start to move into intimacy, there's almost like a move here towards that innocent first love, towards that intimacy. That may be why you see that implied here, that these innocent ideas that we have about intimacy. And I think actually that may be, now that I'm just sitting here talking out loud, that may be one of the things about this card. If we think about our early ideas about love and romance, okay? And again, whoever you were attracted to, the first time you ever felt an attraction that was perhaps sexual in nature, or just like a very strong pull towards somebody, Jung would say that's a projection of the soul archetype onto somebody, and you get caught up in it. You get caught up in it. It may not even be rational. You may like, you ever have that where you really get attracted to somebody and you're like, why am I attracted to that person? Like they don't even feel like they're maybe your type or something, but there's something in them that the soul projects onto them, and there becomes a fascination there. And until that fascination is broken by, I don't know, reality or by something else, you're going to have this fascination. This is how people fall in love. And if they're lucky, they'll get past the projections and have a good relationship, right? But so to me, it's almost like the origins of intimacy, right? When we go back and we have those ideas, we have those dreams that say, oh, you know, what love and marriage is. Like my mom used to say, it was kind of funny. She's like, yeah, she goes, because I had no training in education in this at all. She goes, I watched those movies, you know, that they saw on TV where the women walk around, the men, they start singing to each other. She's like, I don't know. I thought maybe that's what happened. Yeah, you kind of have this weird idea about what love is. Or we think that love, we think about love only on the physical level. You think about the teenage girls who see, so like, I've known these people who've seen guys, and then I'm like, oh, he's going to be my husband. This is going to be this. This is going to be it. You know what I mean? You have this naive idea about love and intimacy and relationship. So I think this is not only about looking back at the past, but it may be about looking at areas where we maybe have had a naivete. That doesn't mean, of course, that, you know, these are not moments that are necessarily worth recapturing if you can have them. Obviously, if you're married to somebody, you don't want to be like, well, we're married now and now I can't stand you. You don't really want it to be that kind of a relationship. If you're making a commitment to somebody, I mean, the day-to-day life gets in the way of regular relationships, and probably friendship becomes more important. Well, intimacy is important, but the friendly aspect of it is also extremely important in relationships, that you're able to be friends as well as lovers. But if you feel that there is things that create barriers to that intimacy, then that's going to break down your trust in relationships. People who have gone through bad marriages, people who have gotten divorced and you know, or been in abusive relationships, things like that will curtail your sense of intimacy. So this could definitely also be a going back to re-examining our ideas around intimacy and so forth. So anyway, just some thoughts on the Six of Cups that popped into my head this morning, and literally all the Six of Cups cards kind of popped out in front of me while I was, you know, getting ready to do this morning. So I was like, well, I guess this is the topic that somebody wants me to talk about. So yeah, so anyway, I hope that's interesting and helpful. Let's do our daily reading before I close off for the day and see what comes of it. It also kind of, I think that would also fit into Crowley's idea of this card being a card of pleasure. He calls it pleasure and putrefaction, but he is talking about 8th house stuff. He is talking about, because you know, the dirty nature of sex, probably, right? Putrefaction, but also, yeah, the way in which something decays. And really, I don't know, I guess when people talk about sex, they talk about it as kind of a mini death, right? They talk about the orgasm as a mini, you know, a mini death. So yeah, interesting scorpionic symbolism there that people often apply to that. So, okay. Oh, and we'll look at what our first card is. Okay. It's kind of funny. And again, maybe this is all coming up right now because we are still in Venus retrograde. These retrogrades, by the way, are just mega intense. I'm just like, I can't wait till they're over. I enjoy the in-depth analysis of the Six of Cups. Oh, good. Thank you. I'm glad that, yeah, it was something that popped into my head this morning, and I thought, you know, this is worth thinking about. Now, we've got the Lovers in the center, too. Now, that's also card number 6. We were talking about the nature of 6. Now, this tends to be Gemini energy, actually, with the Lovers. But, yeah, what we were talking about with intimacy, Alistair said, definitely took a while to learn how to be intimate and not just physical with other men. Yeah, exactly. Well, right, exactly. And that's a really good distinction to draw, because you can be physical with somebody. You hear about the thing of like, yeah, I got physical with you, and then the next day it's like, I hope I never see you again. You know, there's that kind of thing that can happen. But yeah, moving past that to trusting somebody enough to have not just only a physically intimate relationship, but an emotionally intimate one as well. So yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the nature of love here, the nature of love. What is this about here? And the inner feeling of which we are unaware is the King of Pentacles. Now, in this deck, this is an interesting card because the Abundance card is the Zorba the Buddha card, right? This is the guy who is he is actually kind of tantric. It's the sense that, you know, I'm living in the world and I'm enjoying material abundance and material things, but I'm also spiritual. So in other words, you're not getting lost in greed, you're not getting lost in selfishness and all the things that can be the potential fallout of coveting too many things that are material. Again, examining our Venus type values. Also maintaining it with the spiritually aware way of saying that, you know, of non-attachment. So there's the idea that you can do both. And some people say, well, you can't do both. And I think a lot of systems don't promote that viewpoint because there are a lot of people who just, they, for whatever reason, they don't have the experience or maybe they don't have the discipline. So they can't do both. This is why like Tantra as a, well, Tantra, there's other reasons why people don't promote Tantra because it's more ordinary. It's not quite as high level, at least in a lot of people's opinion, but it's based on the idea that yes, you can achieve enlightenment and you can embrace the world as sacred without having to fall into the materialist trap where now it's all about you and selfishness and greed and so forth. So there may be a matter of how we're negotiating that, right? How we're negotiating our needs with the needs of other people, how we're balancing what we've learned, what we've experienced, what we've reflected on with our day-to-day lives and the things that we are dealing with. So the King of Pentacles, yeah, there's kind of this combination of things. Now, the external feeling of which we are aware is the Ten of Wands. Now, we got this the other day, too. This is a card of suppression. And Ten of Wands tends to feel burden. Now, this burden can be, I mean, it can be just, I got so much crap going on in my life and I'm so busy, right? That's one element of the Ten of Wands. I've bitten off more than I can chew, right? I've taken on all this stuff. But the Ten of Wands can also be this idea of this suppressed energy. If we're talking about it in terms of relationships, the way in which we may feel that we have to carry the burdens of others and it may become too much. And at what point do we need to put down what other people expect us to carry? Okay, so that's what we're aware of. We may be aware that there's too much that we're carrying and it's kind of like, okay, I mean, whether we want to or not, something really has to give. Like what needs to be let go of. And it's interesting because this does seem to be a time where there's a lot of 11th, 12th house energy where we may be reevaluating relationships. We may be reevaluating our connections and what those connections are to us, right? So our advice card is the Eight of Cups, letting go. We may be at a point where we're walking away from people, situations, or things that are no longer appropriate to where we're going or to the new reality or the new rules that we live in. But the outcome card that we have today is the Ten of Cups. It's the card of harmony. So this is not about separation in the sense of heartbreak and walking away from things. If we're going to take it with the context of the Six of Cups, it's almost like saying incorporating that element of happiness that we have, that element of, you know, because as children, you know, you haven't reached the middle school, everybody's in cliques and everybody, you know, you're not cool enough and you're not this and you're not that. You know, you haven't reached that stage yet. So there's almost a harmony that comes that we are trying to maybe get to or to recapture. But it may mean letting go of some of these ideas that we have, maybe around love, intimacy, and trust, or maybe on what our expectations is. You know, how much when we love someone, you know, you support each other. How much are you carrying too much of that other person to some degree? So almost like a renegotiation. Yeah, there is kind of a renegotiation there. There's certainly, it is one of the cards of kind of standing still and, you know, having that moment of tranquility, having that moment of being able to recapture that. And yeah, so then at that point there would be, because then you move into the Seven energy, right? That is the renegotiation. We think about that. Seven of Pentacles is reevaluation. Seven of Cups is what's real and what's not real. Seven of Wands is, do I hold my position and stand firm in spite of criticism? And what am I missing? The Seven of Wands, Seven of Cups, Swords. Seven of Swords, right? You know, is there somebody who's not being above board with me that I have to think about, right? So yeah, you're moving those energies. So I said that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think it's, so yeah, I think I think, kind of meditating on the scorpionic nature of the Six of Cups and how it may not just have to do with childhood and our ideas about, our past friends, maybe even our first loves, but what is that? What do we want to revisit there that either we want to recapture, or what are we revisiting there? What is the thing there that we can take forward, even though we know you can't really go back to what that was. Nonetheless, there's some token, there's some treasure that remains, right? So it's a matter of trying to figure out what that is. So yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me today. It's 1:15. I will be on tomorrow. And like I said, I've got a lot to catch up on in terms of advertising classes and other stuff for transition life coaching and other things, hoping that this stuff with this class this new class I'm teaching is going to calm down and that I don't have to put so much energy into it. But anyway, thank you guys so much. Have a good Friday, and I will see some of you tomorrow. Yeah, have a good start to your weekend, and we'll talk about the eclipse tomorrow.